Thank you.
That was a good delay. We have more people still joining. So we'll wait for a second. From SCTA, we have Drew Nichols, Chris Barney, Shauna Gauze, James Cameron, I assume, and Suzanne Smith. I am your chair from the city of Healdsburg, Larry Zimmer, Elizabeth Tyree from County Parks, Kristen Thigpen from Vision Zero, Steve Urbanek, County Public Works, Eric Jansen, Cloverdale, Hunter McLaughlin, Sonoma County, Colleen Ferguson from the city of Sonoma, and I'm sorry, Rachel.
I'm with Santa Rosa City Bus at the city of
Santa Rosa City Bus.
Thanks.
Nancy Adams from the city of Santa Rosa. Joe Gaffney representing, I forget these days.
What do you want me to represent? So I'm here for, in lieu of Tony Bertolero for the city of Sebastopol.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Ken Eichstadt from city of Petaluma, Craig Scott from the city of Cotati, Edie Takata from Roner Park, Nader Dahu, sorry if I mispronounced that, from Sonoma County. Sean Sosa, you want to introduce yourself or where you're from? Oh, City Bus, Santa Rosa City Bus. Thank you. Vincenzo from Sonoma County, Stephen Schmidt from SCT, and Joanne Parker from SMART, Alejandro Perez from Windsor. Hopefully that is everyone. That is the most challenging part of chairing this meeting. Next, do we have any public comments? I'm not seeing anyone from the public here, so I will assume we do not. Item 3, approval of the meeting minutes. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? Seeing none, can I get a motion?
Move to approve, Larry.
Second, Nancy.
Thank you. Moved by Steve Urbanek, seconded by Nancy Adams.
I just got out of there.
Onward to item number 4, SB 743 travel model 4.1, the VMT calculator. Chris.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So just an update on the VMT reduction and mitigation calculator. So I've talked about this a couple months in a row. So at our last meeting, there was general consensus that we'd like to go forward with a spreadsheet-based reduction calculator. So I've put together a more detailed budget and timeline along with a cost sharing plan based on population share, which is attached in the agenda. Took this to the planners last week, so they were supportive of moving forward with this project. So just wanted to get any comments on the updated scope, schedule, cost sharing plan from the TAC as well. And if everything looks good, we'd be looking at taking this to the SCTA board in October for approval, and then kicking the project off in December with Fair and Peers doing the work on the calculator. So just a few notes on the funding. We've been able to spread it over fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23 to kind of make it a little easier to for the local contributions. And there's also been a suggestion by the planners to include a meeting or workshop with the development community and consultants working on VMT implementation and environmental documents to get their feedback as well. The final deliverables for the project would be a spreadsheet-based tool that everyone would have access to calculate VMT mitigations, and training with Fair and Peers as well. And we're planning on having Fair and Peers meet with the TAC and PAC members as well to get feedback early on and along the way to make sure that we're able to include everything that everyone would like to see in the tool. So with that, that's my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Edie.
So, Chris, does the item going to the board have the amount over the 2 years for each jurisdiction, so I can know how much to charge our planning department's budget?
Yes, it's actually on, let me see, page 8 are the local contributions.
Okay.
So it looks like for Roanoke Park, based on population share, it's 4,500.
All right. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, moving on to 4.2, the SB 743 implementation survey, Chris.
Yeah, so thank you everyone again that participated in the survey that went out last month. I apologize for the little hiccup we had early on. So we got that solved and got some information back. So I just wanted to run through the results of that very quickly. And I've included a summary as an attachment to the agenda as well. So Drew, am I able to share screens?
Yes,
right
you
now?
should be able to share.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and bring that up. Okay, so I'll just go through the results just to provide a high level overview of where everyone's at right now. So there was a question about familiarity with SB 743. So everyone knows a little bit about it. Some are more familiar with others. So that was one of the first questions. For project level VMT review policies, 50% review projects on a case-by-case basis. Some have no project level policy in place right now, and some do have policies in place. A number of jurisdictions have identified VMT estimation and calculation methodologies, including trip generation rates from ITE using the travel model, waiting for SCTA to provide support on that, and working on other methodologies. On VMT pre-screening, there are a number of different ways of doing that that have been identified, including project size, trip generation and number of trips, proximity to transit, map-based VMT screening, affordable housing. And then most of these are actually in the OPR guidance on what could be used to pre-screen projects. The question on VMT thresholds, most are actually going with the OPR guidance, 15% below city or regional average VMT. Petaluma has a different threshold based on the Air Resources Board, 16.8%, and some don't have a threshold yet. And then on mitigation, this is one thing that the mitigation calculator will help out a lot with. 50% don't have anything in place. About 40% are considering it on an ad hoc basis. And then there is some mitigation effectiveness measurement in place. On level of service, most people are still going to be considering level of service as part of the entitlement review process. And then we have a list of other SB 743 support items here. So thank you for providing that. We'll be able to help address that. And then some additional information. So again, this is all summarized in the spreadsheet that's attached to the agenda, but just wanted to run through that quickly. Just as a tool, a number of people have requested a compilation of where everyone's at and what types of resources would be useful for people going forward. So again, with that, that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take comments on that.
Thanks, Chris. Good information. Doesn't appear to be any questions. If someone has questions and hasn't raised their hand, feel free to just jump in. All right, moving on. Item number 5, Vision Zero Working Group Update. Kristen?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy to report on our last VSAC meeting, which was, was it last week? We've got MIG on consulting on board, and they presented the survey, I believe, at our last meeting, the last TAC meeting. I was talking about the LRSPs and sort of some of the considerations that we have. We're going to be focusing on, where people feel safe and not safe in their communities specifically, and getting it translated into Spanish and English, doing a lot of promotion, having a certain buy of some digital ads, which hopefully will help get it into some of the harder reach areas, especially with COVID. It's very difficult to get that comfort level with in person. Wanting to, we're wanting to make sure that we get it into some of the equity priority areas of the county, make sure it's in front of elderly, et cetera. So that's a focus that we're working to, especially with some of the digital dollars. With your permission, I'd love to send the survey to you when it's complete, which it should be in the next couple of days. I could have someone at SCTA forward it to everyone. Chris, I'm sure could help me with that, but would love to have you help spread the word. At the end of the day, we're going to have this live probably for about a month. Surveys tend to go couple weeks, very, most robust, and then fall off. We will be getting live updates every time someone clicks. It will be recorded, so they don't have to completely go through the whole survey to have captured some information, which is great. But the other thing I wanted to important detail to share with this group is that the going forward, the data that we receive from this will be something that we want to definitely share. Especially think it could be helpful to those who are considering or at some point in the process of doing their LRSPs. So might help take an item off of a survey you're going to do that might, you could ask another question, that type of thing. So happy to share that when we're ready. And aside from that, we're just continuing to work on refinement of the draft action plan. The next meeting, we'll hopefully go through a few more of the elements, and lots to do in the final months here. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take any.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm not seeing any questions. We look forward to seeing the survey.
Yeah, I'll get it to Chris and we'll get it out.
Sounds good. Still no questions. We'll move on to item 6, measure M, 6.1, invoicing obligation status. I'm assuming Shauna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the same status we bring to you every month. We keep track of the invoicing that occurs and the appropriations that are due to occur in any given fiscal year. If you are highlighted on this status report, then you are approaching the 6-month limit. So get your invoices in. The text that's shown in red are appropriations that were programmed in the last programming cycle. That was May of 2021. We actually went through that whole programming cycle and then programmed funds, and it was requested that the funds stay in that fiscal year, and then those appropriations didn't happen. So that's why that's in red. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Not many questions today.
Not yet.
Moving on, 6.2, measure M reporting letter status report.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's me also. So every year, the Measure M recipients are required to submit an annual reporting letter on how the funds were spent so that we can compile our annual report and provide that to the public. So the staff report that is contained in the agenda shows the status of all the reporting letters. We had 15 jurisdictions or 15 recipients responding. We got 14 of those on time. There was only one outstanding letter. We have since received that letter. That will be reported to the board as well. And we are in the process, after we finish this call for projects, of beginning the development of the annual report.
Any questions on that from anyone? Seeing none, onward to the regional information update, Shauna. 7.1 inactive obligations.
As we do every month, I would like to share my screen at this point, and I will do so. Hopefully everyone can see the staff report, the contained table.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So it is only one table this month. Not really sure why. That's the way it came on from Caltrans, so that's the way it's compiled. And there are a number of jurisdictions, pretty much the same operators that have been on here for a while. We've been through them. I'm not sure it does anyone any good to browbeat anyone at this point. You know who you are. Please do your best to remove your projects from this list. Your status on this list does impact your good standing in the evaluation that we do for future funds programming.
All right, enough said. 7.2, Clean California Local Grant Program.
That is just an informational item, Mr. Chair, that that program is open and accepting grant applications. So anybody who's interested should look into it.
Is that a newer grant that's been around for a while?
I don't know the answer to that, but my impression is that it is new.
I'm wondering
Yeah,
if
so
anyone on the committee, oh, go ahead.
It's brand new, and there's some workshops that the CTC is conducting. It's probably worth checking out one of the workshops or the draft guidelines that they have available. I believe applications are due in February of next year. There'll be a call for projects in December. Most of the information that you'll find online focuses on the local component, right? So these are direct grants to you. There's another component that SCTA is looking into, which is with regard to, there's a statewide pot that can only be used for on-system projects. This particular call for project is primarily for the off-system projects. And yeah, it's just another funding grant opportunity that, you know, I would encourage all the jurisdictions to take a look at and see if they have projects that would be eligible that would suit their needs.
Excellent, thank you for that. Anyone have any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Shauna is still in control of the screen. We're now going to item 8, but we're changing the order. 8.2, list of projects received.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these just got listed out of order by accident. The first item that I'd like to talk about is just a list of the project applications that we received during our 2021 SCTA funding program call for projects. We received we received more than 60 projects, and we did the call for projects. Let me back up. We talked about this strategy in June. In July, we brought an application to the TAC to make sure that everybody was on board with this and how the kind of information that we would be collecting. And then in August, we released the call for projects. The due date was September 16th. We received a number of projects by the deadline. We did receive a few projects after the deadline. And given the time constraints of evaluation and getting everything put together for this meeting and for additional meetings with the board, those projects that came in late were not evaluated for the next item. They will be, however, considered and evaluated for the rest of the 2021 funding program, but they were not considered for the STIP and CRISA item, which is next. The years that we will be programming are 22-23 through 26, 27. And let me just scooch over to the next. Oh, I did also want to include in your packet the list of projects that received Quick Strike funding, which was the last most recent programming cycle that we went through. That was also CRISA money, but it is already programmed. So this is just a reminder of the jurisdictions that received that funding. And then I'll move on to.
I'll jump in real quick, just so everyone knows, these two handouts were not part of the original packet, but sent out by Drew today.
That's right. So they came out in an email just before the meeting. So with that, unless there are there questions about the list itself? I should be on 8.2. That one. There is the list. And there are 2 pages to the list. First page is all the projects that came from the Public Works. And the second page is the transit operators list. Steve, I see your hand
Sean,
raised.
thank you. So what we're talking about here for these projects that you have listed right now is it's what 5.9 million is what you're looking at allocating the STIP and the.
I'm not to that item yet. We're still on just the
Oh.
project list.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thought you were there. Apologies.
No worries. This is just the project list. What I am requesting from the TAC is that the TAC members review this list, make sure that we've appropriately represented your projects. You will find that a number of projects listed sub-projects or phases in that instance. For example, with Sonoma County, there were 4 phases in the Mirabel Road corridor. They've all been listed as one project, the fourth priority, and then each of the grant requests, because they are separate grant requests, are shown separately here. So please do review what is on this list and make sure that we've represented your projects appropriately so that when we take it to the board, we know that it's accurate. That concludes this item, Mr. Chair. Be happy to move on to the next one unless there are questions.
Seeing none, please do.
Okay, that moves me on to 8.1, which is actually.
Hey, Shauna, sorry.
Yes.
I'm not used to having the little tiny screen here with when you share screen, so I was having a hard time finding my mute button. So I just wanted, maybe offline we can talk about our total request for Santa Rosa's project. I have a different figure, so we can chat through that offline.
Yeah, that sounds great. Offline
okay.
is perfect. Thank you. Okay. So the next item is the item of a proposed project list for the funding that is immediately available or it is in the most urgent need of programming. So we did this call for projects and we tried to time it up with the call for projects that is required for the 2022 STIP cycle and for the remaining unprogrammed CRISA funds. CRISA is the COVID Recovery and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And STIP is, of course, the State Transportation Improvement Program. For the first time in a decade, we have STIP funding available to us in this STIP cycle. So we are reviewing these projects initially with an eye toward programming these 2 funding programs. There are still a number of funding programs that will be considered later once we get some additional information about the One Bay Area grant. We expect that information to come out in December. We may or may not do a supplemental call depending on the kind of required information that's listed in the procedures and guidelines from MTC at that time. If we have what we need, we may not even need to do a call for projects. For that, we might already have them. We'll see what happens when we get there. That being the case, we are intending to try to program the CRISA and STIP because we have to provide those projects, those proposed projects to MTC by October 6th. And that is actually prior to our board meeting. So we will be proposing a draft list to MTC and then taking that list to our board on October 11th, and then getting that approval and submitting a final list to MTC. With that, there are a number of things that I should draw your attention to. So the CRISA money is available early and it must be allocated. That means get your allocation from the CTC no later than September 30th, 2024. That would be the absolute latest. Obviously, you wouldn't wait until that deep into it because there won't be a meeting on September 30th, right? It would have to happen before then. And even so, we don't want to wait until the very, very end. So we looked to the project list for projects that would be eligible for the CRISA program and would be available early or are looking for funds early and would fit within the available funding. So the CRISA funding is about $2.3 million. And then those projects are also eligible for STIP. So any project that is not selected for the CRISA funding is automatically considered for the STIP funding. However, the STIP funding isn't available until 25-26 and 26-27. So any project that was able to accept those funds and be delayed until that point would also be considered for those funds if it wasn't a problem. So we did consider a couple of different options as far as how we want to program this, but given that because we could defer our STIP programming. We don't want to do that because we don't want to lose the STIP programming capacity. This is the first time that we've had funds in a decade, like I said, but we need to have a placeholder. We have to program the funds, not a placeholder, but we have to program the funds in order to maintain that capacity. If we were to defer, that means the capacity that we have currently in 25-26 and 26-27 would likely get programmed to other agencies. So in the next STIP cycle, in the 2024 STIP cycle, we would have that funding plus additional STIP share, but it wouldn't be available until after 2027. It wouldn't be available until 27-28, 28-29, because all of the other capacity generally gets taken up with other projects if you don't move forward. If you defer, then you lose your spot. So because we don't want to lose our spot, we are proposing to program those STIP funds. So that being the case, we looked at all of these projects for eligibility to the program, for these projects' ability to address the CTP goals. The CTP was just approved last month, so we want to make sure that we are trying to address the goals of the CTP. We have, and Steve, this should answer your question, the STIP funding available is about $3.6 million and the CRISA funding is $2.3 million. As I mentioned, CRISA is available in 22-23 and the STIP money isn't available until the later years, 26 and 27. So we looked at whether a project was eligible for CRISA. Was it available? Was it able to be delivered early? Was it not just able, but did the application demonstrate that the project was ready to go by the deadline? We want to make sure that we're programming the funds in 22-23 so that we avoid that 23-24 year entirely, if we can, reserving that for should project run into problems. We don't want to anticipate problems, but we know that it happens. So we want to make sure that we're programming to the 22-23 year. That we wanted to make sure that the total grant request was within or close to the available amount that was in STIP and CRISA. We wanted to make sure that any jurisdiction that was proposing projects had a demonstrated prior ability to deliver. If there had been problems delivering in the past, then that was something that we took into consideration. As I mentioned, we wanted it to meet multiple CTP goals, not just one, but multiple. It was very important that the project would be likely to get a PSR or equivalent in time. That means because STIP projects require a PSR, a project study report, a project initiation document, or equivalent. And that's doable, but it's required. And if it's on the state highway system, it must have a PID. It must have a project initiation document. That's not something that you can just whip out. It has to be, that's a much more significant document. If it's off the state system, then you can have the equivalent, and that's easier to do. But for those projects that are on the state highway system, that was something that we had to take into consideration. And then we wanted projects that were fully delivered in the early years of the funding program, as opposed to grant requests that extended beyond the available years for CRISA. So if a project requested some grant funding in the early years, but the construction wasn't until outside that 22-23 year, then that pushed it out of our initial consideration for CRISA because it's not going to be able to be fully delivered. And so we were looking for project amounts that didn't exceed the entire available amount and that were able to be delivered fully. So, as I mentioned, sponsors that have failed to deliver or have been on the federal in obligation list for multiple consecutive months were not shortlisted for consideration for these funding sources. All of those projects will be considered for the rest of the funding program, but they're not going to be considered for this program because it is so rigorous. We wanted to make sure that we were working with project sponsors that have the ability and the resources to do it. And so you had to have a demonstrated prior ability. So with that, just a quick refresher of the projects that we received. There are a number of them that are on the state highway system. Those are listed here just for your reference. Rail projects can also be eligible, but again, the projects submitted far exceeded the available funding, so they were not included in the shortlist. So, and that's the case for the most of these projects on the state highway system is the ask exceeds in the most part, not Arata Lane, but and not the Highway 101 or 116, but all the rest of the asks are well beyond what is available. And because we wanted to fully program a project, it didn't make sense to program these funds for those projects. So with that, I'm going to move to 8.1A. Again, this is just a reference, the quick strike funds that we received. Then I'm going to go here, and this is the short list of projects. So let me make this bigger so you can see it. Oh, it's a little bit too big, but you get the idea. Hopefully you can all bring this up and review it at on your own screens. But the short list includes Healdsburg, Grove Street Neighborhood Plan, Rohnert Park. These are in alphabetical order, to the best of my ability, by the way, by jurisdiction. They are not in any order of preference. So just so you know how they show up on the list. The order in which they appear is not at all important. Healdsburg, Grove Street, Rohnert Park, Southwest Boulevard, Sonoma County, Mirabel Corridor, Phase 3, Santa Rosa City Bus, the bus charging infrastructure Phase 1 and Phase 1B and Phase 2. And those are proposed for CRISA because of the amounts and the years in which they were deliverable based on what was in the application. And then any projects that are not selected for CRISA can automatically come down to the STIP list, as I mentioned earlier, but they but they need to be able to be delivered in the later years. It would be, the project sponsor has to be okay with pushing it out to those years when the STIP money is available. So those projects, in addition to the ones listed above, are the Petaluma Lynch Creek Trail, Santa Rosa Bicycle and Pedestrian Connections, the pedestrian pathways component, the other two of the other Mirabel Corridor projects. There are 4. There's a big one that's $6 million, but the other 3 fit within the available amount of funding. The Sonoma County Transit expanded all electric bus charging capabilities at the Sonoma County Transit facility, and the development of remote charging stations. Santa Rosa Regional Resiliency and Economic Development of Highway 101 Corridor bike ped element, because that one was in a later year. And finally, the Windsor-Arata Lane interchange, because that one already has a PID. So let me just go back to the staff report now, real quick. Here we go. I'm just going to go back to our recommendations so you know what's happening here. So the staff, we are requesting that the TAC review the short list of projects and have a discussion about what things we need to focus on. And we will take all of this into consideration when we make our final recommendation. But we are looking for the TAC to provide quite a bit of input on what we've put together so far. There are a lot of considerations. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would look to you first. Oh, it looks like James has something he wants to say before I hand it over. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so just to frame it a little bit more, right? We're only talking about the 5.9. We're not talking about the whole funding plan, right? So that dropped out a lot of projects fairly quickly. So just keep that in mind. The bigger funding plan, we want to move forward with that once we know the guidelines or the requirements of OBAG 3 and come up with a larger funding strategy. You know, regretfully, this is rushed again, similar to the other Chrysler money that went through Quick Strike. Keep in mind that, you know, here staff at SCTA, we did run out of time on this. We did not have enough time to make a solid recommendation to you. So we kind of have this, you know, came up with this, you know, very open and transparent process of our latest short lists to try to talk through with you to get to recommendations. Please keep in mind that the projects that we may or may not be able to agree on today, they will be taken into account looking at that larger funding program. So if a jurisdiction was to get a large project as part of these, you know, this STIP CRISA or the regular STIP dollars, you know, that would make them less likely to be successful in other parts of the 2021 you know, funding program that we're putting together, right? Because we're very interested in addressing the entire county geographically and all the jurisdictions here. With that, I just want to close with, you know, keep in mind that, you know, this is not clean money, right? It's federal money, and it's federal money with an additional CTC requirement where you have to have a CTC action for your allocation that goes through. So it's like your regular OBAG money plus this extra CTC action. And then having that PID for on-highway system or the PID equivalent for off-highway system is another, you know, complexity to it when we start talking about the dollar amounts. The reason why I want to focus on that is that because of those factors, it is ideal if you know, there's less projects as opposed to more, right? When you start parsing it up into smaller dollar amounts and spreading these federal dollars around, you're making more administrative work. So I don't want to tell you that we can't do that, because we can go all the way down as small as $250,000. But I think those of you that have administered these contracts, you're familiar with the work that entails and how there's other fund sources later in the program that would be more appropriate to parse out in smaller dollar values. So with that, I would pass it back to our chair.
Thanks for that, James. Taking them in order. Nancy, why don't you go first?
So I actually just have a couple clarifying questions. So my understanding, and you know, Shauna and James did a really good job of explaining, you know, the STIP, and really it's not an easy process to go through, and you have to have a lot of front end documents already done, and so, you know, describing the steps that a sponsor has to go through it can make it a challenge. And you know, I'm a little confused about the Santa Rosa projects, because we were in our application, we had asked for some of the Carissa money for the Hearn Avenue interchange, and I know SCTA staff is well aware of how ready that project is to deliver. And, you know, that was one of the items that Shauna did mention. And I don't know the focus, you know, a lot of these projects are focusing in on, you know, complete streets and more bike and ped and not on the state system. And I don't know, I really don't know that the STIP is designed for those types of projects in particular. So I would need to have some clarification on that.
All of those projects are eligible.
Okay, so that's fine. So again, I would say that, you know, Santa Rosa has been long and hard working on Hearn, and we are just trying to cobble together the last few dollars for this construction phase. And frankly, there isn't a lot of other choices for Hearn to get it and pull together the funding that we need to improve this interchange. So I guess I was a little disappointed to see that it wasn't in the list, because we had actually requested the Carissa money for the interchange. So I'd like to understand why that didn't occur. And then let's see, I guess for now, I would just pause with that question, and then we can talk about, because I do have some other questions about some of the other comments that were made. So I'll stop there, and maybe if you could answer that question, I appreciate it.
Sure, I wanted to
I was gonna
program
say-
projects. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I think we got a lot of hands up, and we're gonna need to go through this. Would it be okay through the chair that Nancy just list off all your questions, and let's hit them all, and then go to the next person? Would that be all right, Larry?
Sure, that's fine. So
Very good.
okay, so you know, there was a mention about you know, that you're looking at these individual requests through the eyes of if we're you know, on the inactive list. And you know, I guess I wonder about that, because you know, Santa Rosa has a project on the list, but it's not because of us, it's because of Caltrans. So you know, and I guess I wonder about how that is applied to your review, because there were some jurisdictions on that list that have made it to the short list. So I would ask that question and why that occurred. And then I do have a question about the other item, is that there was a mention that jurisdictions didn't turn in their submittals, or after they turned them in after the date. And so I just, I'm trying to balance this, right? So, you know, Santa Rosa not only turned their projects in, but we also got our item to our city council. And I don't know if other jurisdictions were able to do that. But, you know, I'm looking at kind of an equitable lens that the SCTA puts on evaluating these projects, and the responsiveness of project sponsors to, you know, to make their submittal. So that's just a comment. Thanks.
Okay, James,
Shauna,
do you want to try?
do it?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, or do you either?
Or do you want to take all the questions and then try to answer everything? I think we should do
No, I
question.
think we should answer Nancy's question before
Yep.
we move on. It'll be hard.
Agreed. Okay, so I will tell you that inactive obligations were considered. It depends on the jurisdiction, and you'll notice that even though Santa Rosa has been on the inactive obligations list, Santa Rosa is also listed in the short list. So that didn't prevent you from getting a project on the short list. It did, however, prevent some other jurisdictions from getting on the short list. Why not Hearn? Because Hearn has a $9 million ask and we only have $5.9 million total, and or $5.6 million total, and half of it is in 22-23 and the other half is in 26-27, and Hearn needs to be delivered right now. So we didn't feel like this was the right funding source for this project. And when we did our call for projects, we did not ask you to identify which funding source you were asking for. We asked you for your highest priorities and to give us your priorities in priority order, and then we would evaluate the projects and try to determine what source was most appropriate. And then late applications were not considered for this, so they're not even on the short list. They're not shown on the total project list. I mean, well, some of them are because they were submitted, but they were incomplete, and some of them were adjusted. So those late items were not considered as part of this evaluation process. Did that answer your questions, Nancy?
Yeah, I think so. I guess, so Hearn, we didn't ask for $9 million from Carissa. So, you know, we're like I said in my initial comments, we're cobbling together a variety of sources to make it happen. And so, you know, I thought the whole exercise was to try to leverage money to deliver things that are, I mean, we're ready to construct, you know, and this has been an ongoing goal for the city. And I guess I just wonder, you know, like I said, we weren't asking for $9 million through the Carissa program, and our ask was, you know, the 2.3 whatever was available through Carissa to help leverage that money with the other money to put towards the construction phase. So yeah, so I'll just make that comment. And then I appreciate your response about folks who were on the inactive list, and I appreciate the fact that you're, you know, equitably looking at that as you move forward. And then I guess I wonder, just a follow-up question for you say that people that locals who didn't submit on time are not being considered for this call, but are they not being considered for the entire programming? So that's a clarifying.
No, I said that they are considered for the 2021 funding program, all the other sources. They are not being considered for STIP and Carissa.
Okay, and I guess I would wonder why. So that's a question.
Well, if you want to stand up and answer to the board and tell them why they weren't included, I mean, that's facetious. I'm sorry, I take that back. It's because we have to do our best to consider, and we understand that it was a short amount of time. Even though we tried to give it all the jurisdictions as much time as possible, we do recognize that it was a short time frame, and some of the jurisdictions struggled with being able to get resources together or getting personnel to review and sign off, and not even a consideration of getting it in front of the council or the board of supervisors. So they had trouble getting it in on time. So they're not being considered for STIP Carissa, but they are, I think, because we know that, you know, the information for OBAG is not going to come out until December. I suspect that those projects will get considered for that funding source.
All right, I think you've answered my question. I'll yield it to someone else. Thanks.
Rachel, you're next up.
Yeah, I have a quick question and then a comment. The question is, for transit operators, would the Carissa be transferred to FTA as we've done with other federal funding sources?
I don't think so. It requires a CTC allocation. I don't know for certain, but I don't think so. I think it is a STIP allocation.
Interesting. Okay, we might want to discuss that. But, and, you know, the comment I wanted to make, which is related, is that, you know, we have two projects on, two separate battery electric bus charging infrastructure projects listed on the CRISA list right now. And, you know, recognizing that the program is, you know, already oversubscribed with this list. You know, I did want to mention our, you know, our phase 1B project, the first one listed, that's the lower dollar amount project, that is ready to go. It's a gap funding. We already have a $700,000, you know, invested in this facility. We could do it tomorrow. It's a very simple, easy to deliver project. The second project, I honestly think that can wait. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think it's as good a fit for CRISA in terms of deliverability and our timeframe. So if I say that in the spirit of trying to assist the group in getting to the best funding program for these dollars. And so I'd love to keep it in play for other sources, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Rachel. That is very much appreciated. And I will tell you that we listed them together because we thought that I understand that 1B is ready to go, whereas 2 is possibly further out, but we sort of saw them as in concert, particularly because a $245,000 project it's a pretty onerous process to go through. So we kind of wanted to put them together so that you might get some economy of scale if you tried to bundle them together and deliver it as one package or that sort of thing. You know, that would be something that we would have to discuss later. But because there is a $250,000 minimum, so 245 doesn't really meet that
we can round
bar.
up. But, you know, I think let's, I don't want to bog things down. I think it's also critical. I think it would be helpful to understand the question about the FTA transfer, because obviously a low dollar amount project going through the FTA process, it's easy and painless for us relatively, but there could be some other considerations. So, you know, if you don't mind, in light of the conversation here today, maybe we can have some discussion, but, you know, I do want to just be forthright about sort of how different those two projects are in terms of their deliverability at this point in time. So maybe I can follow up with you.
Great,
separately.
Thank you.
Okay.
Edie?
Yeah, real quick. PSR equivalent is needed for CRISA, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Southwest Boulevard, complete streets. Yeah, I mean, this would just be an extension of the work that we're doing on the roundabout, which bid favorably. Actually, I'm really surprised and happy with the roundabout at Southwest and Commerce. So, it looks like 2.3 is what's available for CRISA, and we requested 2.5, and we can make up the gap on between 2.3 and 2.5. Now is the time we're budgeting now. So yeah, that's just my comment and my question about the PSR. Thanks.
Yeah, so PSR equivalent, James, correct me if I'm wrong, is a PES form and a field review for projects that are not on the state highway system.
Maybe you could squeeze it in our field review next week with Caltrans.
So
I'm sorry being facetious, but understood.
Okay. And then, yes, to answer your question overtly, you asked for 2.5. We have 2.3 available. You would have to make up the difference.
You can do that. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other immediate questions? If not, Shauna, are you looking for Healdsburg, Rohnert Park, and Sonoma County to give a brief summary of the projects? Is there something specific you're looking for as far as making one project more deliverable or more highly recommendable to the board?
So I have lots of ideas, but you know, had I come to this group with a list of proposed projects without the time to fully evaluate, all the other projects that I didn't select would have wondered why they didn't get picked. So the intent is to have a discussion about which ones fit the bill of the criteria that I've listed and are best deliverable in the time frame that we have available. So the short, you know, Rachel has already said that she feels like the phase 2 project of the bus charging is probably not the best fit for this funding. So without that, I would while we want to be able to fund the phase 1B, we are going to have other funds available relatively soon that I think we could program to that project and have it be an FTA transfer once OBAG becomes available. That's great. Let's consider that. It's because it's only $245,000. I do believe that it's a pretty onerous process. So I would, with Rachel's understanding and I think suggestion, remove the Santa Rosa City Bus from the CRISA shortlist and possibly push it down to either the STIP or have it be considered for other funding sources like OBAG or local partnership program or the out years of Go Sonoma or one of the other funding sources that we know we are also going to be programming during this time. Let me also say that it is our intent to sit down with all of the project sponsors after we get through this process and go through, there are some inconsistencies in some of the applications. There is some missing information, enough that we could put together something on the list, but there's still some, like, we have questions about some things, and maybe you can clear those things up, and then that makes a project rise to the top. But right now, we would like to sit down and discuss all of these projects so that we have as many details as possible going into the next phase. But right now, we would just want to consider these projects for STIP and CRISA. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that just because a project isn't getting funding here, we're going to consider it for the other funding sources. Also, we didn't necessarily pick the number one priority for each of the jurisdictions. That's because many of the number one priorities exceeded the total programmable amount. So we picked projects based on what would fit within the amount that we have that would fully deliver a project, as opposed to putting another percentage of an amount on a project and not moving it forward because it's not fully, there are still gaps. And so we're trying to figure out what works best. And if we can get a discussion going, that would be great. I see Steve has his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, sorry, Elizabeth, a Sonoma County partner there. I'm gonna tap you on the shoulder about Parks' ability to deliver projects with this money that, as described by Shauna, being difficult to do. I mean, the Occidental Road gap closure fits into the funding program quite nicely. The other thing I would add too, and I'm not sure how you guys sorted this through, but I would toss it into a little sifter, and the folks who got the quick strike, maybe the folks who didn't get quick strike might float higher up on the top of water here for some of this consideration from others. But Elizabeth, you've heard sort of the conversation that's going on here. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about the gap closure there for the West County Trail.
Well, Steve, as you saw with our application materials, the Occidental Road gap is our most ready to go project with work already significantly complete for environmental, soon to be complete for right of way. And we put in our application with just an open question of which funding source would be, we didn't assign any funding source to any of these projects. But so everybody knows the Occidental Road from Highway 116 to the existing trail is along the north side of Occidental Road at the intersection of Highway 116, continuing westward to connect to the existing trail. So right now it's a gap and a safety issue. It's a 0.9 mile, so nearly a mile gap.
And it's class 1, right, Elizabeth? It's not, it's not bike lanes, it's a bike path or.
Correct. Yeah. And so, yeah, this was for regional parks. This was our top priority. And thank you to TPW for including it in your corridor for Maribel Road.
So if I could interject here, so Steve, was your kind of question to Elizabeth about delivering through the federal process?
Yeah, that I just wanted to elevate that, you know, what Shauna's been describing as, you know, running through the sticker bushes in terms of funding. If Parks is ready to run through the sticker bushes here.
We've run through lots of sticker bushes for federal funding on not necessarily this program, but many other programs. Thanks for asking though.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't want to go through the details of each one of these projects. I'm not saying that all these projects are ultimately deliverable. I'm saying that they got shortlisted because on first glance, they look like projects that are eligible for the program and should be considered. Not sure that they're all the best project to be delivered. Just these are the ones that we're considering. James looks like he has something to say.
Yeah, the Edie said she wants the money, right? So, and she's ready for the 3.2 underfunded, right? So that's like, I have that highlighted right now. Regional parks, that Mirabel is awesome, right? Love to ride my bike, not on a shoulder, but on an improved path right there. There is a piece of right of way that has to be purchased. So is that how have we dealt with the property owner? Are we confident we can meet the funding deadlines to deliver that project timely? And then with Grove Street, there was some mention of temporary construction easements, right? Are we confident the temporary construction easements are going to go well, or we have workarounds? Is it that confident, you know, that we want to move forward with that one? And if we can get through that, then whatever isn't selected then drops down to the next list, and then we can try to sort through the next list to try to come up with a recommendation. That's what's happening in my mind right now.
And
I'm happy to respond to that, but after Shauna, Nancy has her hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in addition, Southwest is in service of a PDA. It's in a equity priority community, and it is the Roanoke Parks #1 project, whereas the Sonoma County project is ranked #4, and it is not in a PDA, and it's more than a mile away from the closest PDA, which is in Sebastopol. But these are the things that I've, you know, considered, but the projects got included because they're eligible for this program. But these are the things that I would say weigh for and against each of the projects that we've talked about so far. And Healdsburg, I don't believe is in a PDA, nor does it serve a PDA.
This is Nancy. So through the chair, Larry, James actually had spot on of my question. You helped me figure out like how deliverable these projects are. I did hear from Edie, and I was glad that she was you know, candid about where she was in terms of the deliverability of the Roanoke Park project. So it was helpful that you added, you know, your comments, James, about the Sonoma County Trail and then the Grove Street and Healdsburg. So, you know, if I were to look at this list, and I'll just offer this for discussion purposes among the participants, I would say that, and Shauna, thank you for the PDA reference. That was helpful too. That we might want to consider the Roanoke Park project as one that we'd want to maybe push towards the top. And Rachel's already talked through the city bus projects for us. So if there's anyone that would like to, support that thought, and if you want to have the group wants to have a backup, I'd like that. I would let that be part of the discussion. But I'm leaning towards, putting a support behind the Roanoke Park project for this funding source. So I'll stop there.
Before we get to the recommendations,
Oh,
Nancy,
sorry.
it'd be nice if Healdsburg could actually
Oh,
respond to James's comments and talk about our project, because Edie did get to explain it and I did not.
okay, very good. Thanks. My apologies.
I see Stephen has his hand up if you want to say something quick. Or not quick, sorry, not trying to rush you.
That's all right. I just want to kind of echo what Rachel had to say earlier about our transit projects. Although we're very happy to see it on the short list, we do have a lot of staff time to try to go through a new process in securing the funds through the STIP. And so if we can't flex it over to an FTA project, we may also be willing to drop from the STIP list and wait for OBAG or something that can be flexed as an FTA project. So Brian's not on the call, so I obviously want to talk with him about this, but in listening to Rachel, that seems to make sense for our projects as well. So I'll throw that out there.
Hey, Stephen, sorry, Larry, I'm going to jump in here real quick. You're our rep for the Bike and Ped Committee. Can you discuss a little bit about their perspective on the West County Gap Trail on Occidental Road? I mean, if you've got any input from them that might influence project selection here on the CRIS funds.
This is a tight timeline turnaround, and we haven't had the opportunity to bring it to the committee, a Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, for their feedback. Our next meeting is in a couple of weeks. So, I mean, I don't know what the turnaround is, but I mean, I'd need to defer to the committee for their feedback on a project.
Okay.
All right, so I'll jump in, respond to a little bit of James's and a real brief explanation about the deliverability of this project. This project was nearly fully designed years back. It has been used as a guidance for development in the area. It was the result of a full neighborhood area plan, if you will, and significant public outreach. It is a stretch of road that is somewhat isolated between the 101 Healdsburg Avenue and the Foss Creek. So there aren't a lot of cross streets for pedestrians to use. There's no sidewalk for much of it, intermittent or, a sort of homemade path area. Regarding the right-of-way, all work is within existing right-of-way. The reference in the application was, I don't know very many projects that don't have some form of right to enter. If we're doing driveway approaches, moving mailboxes out of our right-of-way into the private property, those types of right of entries are not difficult to get. The neighborhood is going to be very excited about the project. So there is nothing holding us back in that direction. We are not in a PDA. The city of Healdsburg, unfortunately, does not have any PDAs, but it does ultimately serve this neighborhood into our downtown development area. So if we had a PDA, it certainly would. I'm happy to answer any other questions. And then obviously the difference in cost, the city can easily come up with that. And, while these funds are never fun or easy, We've done many of them and are currently in the process. So we are willing and able to deliver through the CRISA process. That's it.
Okay. There were a couple of other things that I wanted to add, and one is that these two programs will require STIP reporting, which is a quarterly reporting. Many of you are familiar with it if you have ATP funds or any other SB1 funds. Reporting is required once you've obligated. And then anything that is selected for either of these two will need to complete a complete streets checklist as soon as possible, because that is a requirement that we will need to submit in time for the list that goes to MTC. And that completes most of what I have to say right now, unless there are other questions.
So Shauna, are you getting what you need here? Sounds like we did a little bit of narrowing, but I don't know if there was an ultimate conclusion. I'm sure Edie and I can go back and forth and sell a little more.
Yes. Right now, it's looking like the CRISA funds are between Healdsburg and Roanoke Park. And I would say that, in my opinion, something that is in a PDA would outweigh something that isn't. While Grove Street rose to the top very early in the evaluation process, because it is not part of a PDA, that does have some drawbacks, but I would say
Shauna,
that,
is there a reason you left the Occidental Trail off that conversation? Sound like Parks was totally into having that project be considered here.
sure. I also heard you throw them under the bus, so I wanted
No,
I mean,
that didn't throw anybody under the bus.
okay. That's not what I heard, but okay.
I think the question was, Steve, sorry for interrupting, Shauna, and maybe you or Elizabeth can explain the right-of-way need that James brought up.
There's a small stretch of right-of-way that we're negotiating on right now for the trail corridor. And so it's a pinch point, and we have negotiations underway with our acquisition specialist. So in our timeline, we have that ending February of 24.
Is it a single owner? Are you negotiating with one property owner?
That's my understanding.
I'm sorry, did you say your right-of-way negotiations ending in February of 24? Because that would push it right out of the consideration.
Sorry, wrong spreadsheet. Right-of-way ending October this year, and it started October last year. My apologies. Thank you for catching that, Shauna.
Okay.
So you're well down the road on that, Elizabeth, right?
Yep.
So you're close to an agreement with them?
Yep.
So I wouldn't eliminate it. And I will say that Mirabel also rose to the top really quickly in the initial evaluation, particularly that section, that phase 3 section. But it's also not in a PDA. I mean, I have to weigh all of these things, and that's one of the considerations.
Is it the sole consideration? It seems like
No.
giving it considerable weight.
I am giving it considerable weight. I'm giving a whole bunch of other things considerable weight too.
Okay.
All other things being equal, that is something that is different between the projects. I'm not saying that it's not an eligible project. I'm not saying that it's not worthy. I'm not saying that I didn't consider selecting that project also as a recipient. That's why it's on the list, is because I think it's eligible. But I'm just saying, if we're drawing conclusions and differences between the projects, that's one thing that stands out.
I don't think bike riders care if they're in a PDA or not. I think they enjoy the class 1 trail.
Sure. Agreed.
I want to see painted lines out on the roads out here when you enter and leave a PDA. That would help everybody understand what we're doing. Sorry, Sean, I'm teasing you.
So we have 3 projects under consideration for CRISA. And I have heard input from each of the project sponsors. If the TAC doesn't want to come down on one, that's fine. We've heard a lot of discussion, and we can take all that into consideration before we make a recommendation. And I would look to the TAC to have a similar discussion about the STIP projects.
I do see that Nancy has her hand raised.
So I just have a question for the 3 that are under consideration. So, you know, a scenario could be, I took my video off, but that's okay. Let me put it back on so that you can, yeah. So a scenario could be that, you know, the board looks and knows that those are the 3 that rose to the top based on age eligibility. Is there a willingness, or not a willingness? Is there a capacity if they decided to fund them all? Would all these 3 sponsors be able to take, say, 1/3 of that money and still make their project work? I'm playing a devil's advocate here.
I would argue against that because I don't want to split it up. It's possible, but it seems less efficient to saddle 3 different project sponsors with this type of funding rather than 1 or 2. Just because, I appreciate the offer, Nancy. I do. I get that we're trying to make things equal, but I'm also trying to make things efficient. And I had to work with what I had on paper. So I would not recommend splitting it up.
And that's fine. That makes perfect sense to me, but I'm just throwing out options, right? So
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, as one of those 3, I add that, thanks, Nancy. 1/3 of 2.3 would not be worth it. A half potentially, it gets you to that point where you think about it. Edie?
Yeah, I'd say I was looking at that too. 700. I mean, we could scale ours, but yeah, for the trouble, it would have to be more like $1 million, and even then, right? So
Yeah,
we can plan around it funding wise, but yeah, but I do appreciate. You know, I was thinking that too, Nancy, making the same calculations. So I appreciate you, trying to do some problem solving here. Thank you.
And that question may come up at the board too. So, it's all good, right? Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I agree. Also, it'd be difficult splitting the money. We had to bring in other revenue to make our project feasible. So we're pulling a lot of local sources for this stretch of continuation of the West County Trail Gap. Something I would like to throw out there though, if it's not as high a priority for the CRISA funding, perhaps this West County Trail Gap would move to the STIP list, just as a question.
Yes, I anticipated that if this didn't get funded, that those 3 projects for Mirabel, not all 4, but the 2, 3, and 4 phases of Mirabel would all go as one in under STIP. That was my expectation when I was looking at the projects.
Yeah, the other thing I'm looking at here, Shauna, is just the, I think this Elizabeth's project overmatches. And I'm not sure what the relative level for the other 2 projects are. So there's quite a bit of money, other money supporting this project versus just the CRISA fund. So to me, that's a a positive aspect of their application as well.
Steve, about?
Steve, hello. Yes, please.
She's not. Can I take a message?
Oh, Steve, you unmuted yourself. There we go. I thought there was a question there. Okay, so just to reiterate, we have Healdsburg, Roanoke Park, and Sonoma County to be considered. And then based on which ones tick the most boxes would probably be the one that floats to the top for the staff recommendation.
I'm good with your assessment, Shauna, on the ones that tick the most boxes.
Thank you. With that, I would look to the TAC to start a discussion about the STIP funds. And with the initial discussion that was started by Steve of if Mirabel isn't selected, it would move down to those under consideration for all three of those phases along the Mirabel corridor, phase 2, 3, and 4, to be considered under STIP.
Could you quickly remind me, Shauna, what the dollar value for STIP is?
3.6.
3.6, thank you. So I guess the first question, does coming off of the CRISA list mean it's a higher priority than those on the STIP list in any way? Or scored higher?
I would not say that. It was the only reason they went to the STIP, to the CRISA list, is because they were early deliverers, that according to the schedule that was submitted in the application, those were projects that had the right amount of funding and they fit within the time frame that we had.
Understood. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
I hear you talking, James, but I don't hear you on. We share a wall. That's
All
why
right.
I know.
She gets to listen to me often. On the CRISA projects that are left, if Mirabel and Grove each split the 3.6 and got 1.8 each, and those both can move out, then we'd be done with this discussion. So I'd like to kick it off with that and say, anyone who's on the STIP list, tell me about your project and why we shouldn't do that, right?
Say that again, James. I'm sorry.
All right, so here's a proposal. So the proposal is that Southwest would move forward with the CRISA dollars, and then Grove Street and Mirabel that can be pushed out would split the STIP dollars, right? And then that is essentially a recommendation that we could move forward with, right? So I'm just trying to frame something to have a discussion, right? So if that was the discussion to move forward with, then Petaluma chime in on Lynch Creek Trail, Santa Rosa chime in on your pedestrian pathway component, and then Sonoma County Transit, thank you, Stephen, you already have, but then we have then Windsor on a Rattle Lane, right? I mean, that's a state highway STIP job, right? Is there a PID that's eligible for that? And with that, I am gonna drop off at 3 o'clock, so just to let you know.
Okay, the meeting's closed. I second your motion. Done. Kidding. Ken, why don't you take the floor?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the discussion here. I wanted to give a little background on Lynch Creek Trail LCT, the comprehensive project. Those monies are actually 3 separate projects. This is the last kind of major linkage into getting into downtown. We've got the trail along Water Street that's being constructed right now. We've got a developer at Edith Court that's doing a segment. This particular project gives ADA access from the trail up to Payran, which is a key linkage down to the main library, down to the fairgrounds. It also gives ADA linkage to the existing pathway, and then it completes a gap going over to Edith Court, and then the development by Clover Stornetta will complete that gap. They have committed to doing that. So This is kind of the last of the hardscape for, 2.8 miles. We just finished the section up at north of Payran, and that was 900 feet. That's just been constructed. People just love it. So I was glad to see this go in under STIP. Thank you very much.
Hey, Ken, real quickly before you leave, what is are there any right-of-way needs? Is it serving a PDA? Any environmental concerns, that type of thing?
The PDA, it serves downtown, and there are no right-of-way needs. I've worked with the Army Corps on getting the projects done along the creek, so I don't see any issues with that. We've kind of sort of already went through a test case. And the other part of it is I've got 10% design for the ADA compliance. I know I can get ADA compliant connections in there. So thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Ken, or are we moving on to Nancy? All right, go ahead, Nancy. Got to find that mute button.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So yeah, I'm looking at the screen, and so I think number 4, the resiliency corridor, that's our HERN. We're going to be constructing a class 4 multi-use path along HERN in conjunction with the interchange work that we're doing there. But frankly, that would not, I don't want to complicate that the money with that, because there may be some right of way that we will need. So I think we can kind of push that one down and look for other funding sources. It's only one property owner that we need to negotiate with, but I don't want to complicate these monies. That being said, I'll flip up to number 1, and I'm going to offer actually a little revision to what this is. It says the pedestrian pathway component, and I'm actually going to suggest, rather than put that, I can't see it, it's too small. I think it's 1.2 million. Is that right? Am I looking at that? Yeah, let me see here. It's 1.2. Yeah, 1.2. I'm going to suggest that we use the STIP monies for and cobble that together with the construction phase of the overcrossing. Again, when Santa Rosa did these applications, we looked at how we can leverage the funding throughout the 5 years with city funds and other funding sources to bring these projects to completion. And I think that's what the desire of the SCTA is, to really get that accomplished. So we're going to be asking for OBAG money for overcrossing. So this would be a source that we could leverage with that OBAG request, and that would virtually fully fund the construction phase of this project. We got the ATP grant here earlier this year. So just in terms of, Larry will ask the question. It's like, it is a PDA, right? It's PDA centric. We finished the environmental, both SNEPA and CEQA. We are, we've got a right-of-way negotiations are ongoing, and the design is about at least 35% based on the environmental work that was done for the project. So we anticipate the schedule for that is anticipating construction starting in 2023, with it being a 2-year contract for 2025. So I would just make that suggestion for the committee to consider for Santa Rosa. So that would retain our number 1 priority with the same amount requested, and we would delete our number 4 priority for that 1.121 and remove that from the list. So I'll stop there.
I would just like to point out that Santa Rosa proposed a fully funded project in their ATP application.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry, Larry, are we going down the list or?
Nope. Feel free to speak, Alejandro.
All right. Well, thanks, Larry. Just want to chime in for our Arata Lane interchange, the northbound on-ramp. Many people might know that the on-ramp or that interchange was started a long time ago, and we are down to the last leg of that intersection, and you know it's been identified as a good option, access to vacate the town of Windsor in times of emergencies. So our climate adaptation study has noted that this is something that's still missing from that interchange and needs would help in that exiting the town. Other than this STP STIP funding, I don't know when the town will get a chance to fund this project, other than something like this funding. So that's why I'm happy to see this project make it to this list. So I think everybody in the town of Windsor would really benefit this. And even though it's not directly in the PDA, I think it would help our downtown interchanges with taking away traffic from those downtowns and taking them north to Arata, to head north to Hillsburg and so on. So that's really all I can say for the project right now. So thank you.
Thanks, Alejandro. Elizabeth?
Just to let people know about the other significant Class 1 gap in the West County Trail that's on the list. It's one of the two under Sonoma County. This is along Green Valley Road, where it's the Manzana property frontage. And so this is connecting toward Atascadero Creek. If anybody's ridden or walked out there, you know, you get kind of lost having to wind your way around. This project does require right-of-way. That was the timeline I misspoke of earlier, ending in 2/24. But this is just a little bit under a quarter-mile gap, so it's not very long. And one of the things about PDAs, neither of these Class 1 trails are in a PDA, but they connect to all the way, as you probably all know, they connect to the PDA in Southwest Santa Rosa and also connect to Sebastopol. Unless anybody else has any questions on those projects.
Not seeing any other questions or any other hands raised. Greg?
I'll do the old manual method. I don't see the hand, sorry. Thank you. So I want to just speak to the Cotati 116 corridor improvements that's on the STIP list there in the staff report. So the Highway 116 corridor between 101 just heading out of town towards Sebastopol has been deficient and has a lot of safety issues there for and so this project is proposing to put the long requested traffic signal at the West Cotati Highway 116 juncture. That's a main way for residents on the west side of Cotati to get in to their homes, their area, and it's a very dangerous intersection. There's rear ends all the time where there's not a left turn lane, so anybody making a left going south into that on the West Cotati Avenue is subject to getting rear-ended, and then several times they've gotten pushed into oncoming traffic. It's just a horrendous situation. So the city had put on the community project list for the state a $2 million request for that earmarked in the budget, and that's now being tied up with the I think the federal infrastructure bill, but we've got $2 million request there to complement this $1 million request here. And then the entire project's looking to be about $4.2 million. So the rest would be backfilled substantially by the city's general fund. We have had lots of several conversations with Caltrans, but with Caltrans, it doesn't rise to the list statewide. You know, there's just because of it not being in a major city, but it's no less important for our region. So I just wanted to say it's a good, I think, Shauna, you asked, does it represent the priority list that we provided? And it does. I think this is a good match. The year 23-24 is when we'd look for construction of this project. And that funding request is what we had in our application. So everything seems to be a good match.
Thanks, Craig. I didn't actually shortlist the Katati project because it has the contingency of being an HR 3860, whatever it was. And because there was no information in the environmental section of the schedule, which to me was a big red flag. There was nothing on that line. And because it doesn't have a PID yet, and it is on the state highway system. So that's why it didn't get shortlisted. It's not that we don't think it's a very valid project, and it's not that we don't want to fund it. It's your highest priority project, and we, you know, and it will be considered for all of the other funding sources, but we just didn't shortlist it for STIP CRISA.
Elizabeth, your hand is still up. Apparently it wasn't supposed to be. Thank you for that, Shauna, because I wasn't seeing that on the list. So very clear. Anyone else have any comments?
So if I could just summarize, Mr. Chair.
Please. Good luck.
I heard Santa Rosa say drop the Highway 101 interchange portion and put the money that is on this list toward the overcrossing itself rather than to the second phase, which is the pedestrian and pathways component. And I heard that Sonoma County Transit say that similar to Santa Rosa City Bus, they would probably prefer to have some other source of funding than STIP because the process is so onerous that they are happy to be considered, but that they feel that it would be a better fit for a different program. So we could drop that off the list.
Yeah, I still need to talk to Brian about that. So.
Okay.
Need a decision right now.
Well, if you could get to me by the end of the day or tomorrow, that'd be ideal, because we have to put together a staff recommendation, and I feel that it needs to be solid. Arata, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Alejandro has a PID, so that is one checkbox that would be good.
Yes, well, it was done a long time ago when these plans were all approved, so yes.
Okay, it might need to be refreshed, but we would see.
Probably, most likely, yeah, we'll have to run through some standard through Caltrans again, but yes, they were all, it was all done prior.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure I heard all of these things accurately. Petaluma Lynch Creek Trail able to be delivered and is partway through a design process and partway through a right-of-way process, I think I heard. And that should be, I did have questions about your application, Ken. There were a number of things that I wanted to sort out. So while the project is listed as eligible, I would want to have those questions answered before I recommended it as a project that would get STIP funding, but that's not unsolvable.
No problem. Yep.
And then Sonoma County, we've heard all about the Mirabel corridor. So I think we're all in agreement that we understand what that's about. That's all that, that's all the input that I heard about those projects. Yeah.
I think that was a great summary. Real quick question for Alejandro. So Windsor's request is 3 million, there's 3.6 available, and just kind of making some guesses that SCTA may want to do a little bit of shuffling. I'm assuming within Windsor's application, they stated whether or not they could take a lesser amount.
Are you
Honestly,
asking?
would have to look. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
kinda.
answer that because I don't have the answer.
I'm sort of,
Not everybody
necessarily my
provided that
concern,
information.
but it seemed like a good piece of information for SCTA to know.
Would it,
Is it scalable?
is it scalable?
Is your request scalable?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it would help us. This would be the what we would be looking for. Scalable, not too much, I guess, is really the issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I think we've received a lot of really valuable input. I appreciate all of your participation in this. It was not an easy process and it was condensed. I will tell you that it's been a rough couple of days, but it's all coming together. So I did hear that I think everybody would be okay with moving forward Rohnert Park in the CRISA funds and moving the other projects down to the STIP list. And then we will go over all of the input and try to determine what we would do as a STIP recommendation. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
I'm not sure that I would word it that way, but yes, I acknowledge without knowing the rest of the project that Rohnert Park does have a PDA, we do not. But not seeing the rest of their project, I can't really say that they are scoring better or it's a better project.
Sure. Understood.
All of the requirements.
And we will.
I'm just acknowledging that they have a PDA, we do not.
Okay.
So, you know, I'd like to be kept in that conversation, but.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say the same
and
thing.
Vincenzo had his hands up.
Yeah, I was wondering if, thank you, Chair Zimmer. I was wondering if it would help the committee if we had another column to this list that actually asks percentage of amount requested to the total project. So that last question of asking for Alejandro, if he could reduce his 3 million ask, well, the whole total project is 4.6 million. So how much more of a haircut, you know, can they sustain? Would that help the committee if we had that column that said, you know, this is what percentage we're asking in terms of total project?
I can certainly add it in terms of taking it to the board so that they have that information as well.
Yeah, Sean, maybe something to consider too, I guess, just from a funding perspective, agencies that are overmatching this program, you know, that they're putting more skin in the game and leveraging regional dollars to a higher degree than some other projects are. Seems like that should have some flotation to it as well in terms of rising up in the list.
Agreed. Okay. I think I have what I need, Mr. Chair, unless there is anything that anyone else would like to contribute.
Not seeing anything.
Right.
So good luck. Good luck cleaning up that mess you guys made.
Thank you.
The next item is the SCTA RCPA board meeting of October 12th. I did not see anything in the forward agenda. Is there anything we should talk about?
I can share it right now, Shauna.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Drew.
Did you see it?
Yes, I see it now.
Okay.
So we have a number of items on the agenda. As I mentioned earlier, the Measure M annual reporting letter status will be one of the things that is taken to the board. It is on consent, so there won't be any discussion unless the board members request it. And then we will be taking the candidate list of projects and the proposed list of projects for the STIP and CRISA to the board. We also have a number of other items under RCPA and SCTA, and I'm happy to discuss any of them. We are talking about final budgets. We always do final budgets in October, and I would answer any questions about the board agenda.
I'm sorry if I just wasn't paying good enough attention because I was trying to read the small print here. But you said, so this Carissa STIP information is going in the next meeting on consent, or that's going to be a regular item?
Regular item.
Okay, good. What was the consent one you were just talking about?
Measure M annual reporting letter status.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, my bad.
Nope, it's all right.
That all sounds good to me. Anyone else have questions on that? Seeing none, any other business announcements? Everyone's worn out.
I just to make a comment, I appreciate Shauna and James going through all this. This was a lot of, I know it was a lot of work on your end. It was a lot of work on our end just to get and respond to this in short order. And, the conversation is now beginning. The board directors will have conversation around this, but I appreciate this. I did hear something, Sean, about, the SB1 and the LPP program and how they're trying to coincide that with the STIP program and make it more towards the out years to 26, 27. So, I think, and Kenny Cow was on the call there earlier this week, but I think the more we can coincide these funding sources, especially if you're doing this 5-year programming to help locals, figure out how to leverage monies for projects, I think that's going to be important. So anyway, thanks for all the work on it and more to come.
Thank you, Nancy.
With that, we are adjourned 3:20 p.m. Hope you all have a good weekend and we will see you all in a month, if not sooner.
Thank you all.
Thank
I
you
really
very much.
appreciate your time and input.
Thank you.